The year is 1980, and yes, are at a crossroads. John Anderson and Rick Wakeman are out, and in step two unlikely recruits, Trevor Horn and Geoff Downes of the Buggles. What followed was drama, an album that split fans, redefined the band, and proved Yes could survive, even without their classic lineup. Stay with us.
Get ready for the 3324 podcast, where lifelong friends Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber share their love of all things music and movies. Dean has directed short films and is a music trivia buff. And Eric, trained in audio engineering, brings his extensive knowledge of music and film to the conversation as they discuss, debate, and celebrate their favorite albums, films, and much more.
Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast. I guess fourth time is the charm with that intro.
Yeah.
People are only going to hear the first one, but this was a four bagger.
That's all right.
Quite a dramatic effect.
Yeah. It is. Yeah. When I mess things up, they just sit there and laugh. Like I want to be on that side.
Hey, man, they're
just kind of in the gallery, just kind of watching me mess it up and just kind of laughing about it.
I never laugh.
Oh.
Never laugh.
Okay.
I'm usually straight faced. But in this case, you're kind of poking fun at yourself. So
yeah,
why not?
I laugh at it.
There you go.
It's funny because the stuff's sitting right in front of me. So anyway, enough said about that. Welcome to the 3324 podcast. If you're new, welcome aboard. We love to have you. There's a bunch of episodes you can check out. And if you're a returner, again, we're always thankful and grateful that you stick with us each and every week, and that you take the ride with us through the music and movies that shaped our lives and hopefully shaped yours, or in this case, opens some new doors, which it did for me. We've got a guest with us, Mr. Kuber.
Okay.
Mr. Kuber. Hi, I'm the guest. No,
Mr. Kuber. I'm kicking it over to you.
Oh yeah, we have Mr. Chris Clark with us.
Hey, good to be here.
Resident prog fan.
Yes, so and I'm very excited about this record.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, now if I was that kind of person, Chris, I would have gotten somebody else to be a guest.
I would have been so heartbroken, man. I'm looking.
And you would have to see one day the episode show up on Spotify, and you'd be like, "What the?"
That'd have been a kick to the pills, man. I'm not gonna lie.
I never heard that expression before. Kick to the pills. Okay, that's cool. Yeah. All right.
Would you be a farmer? Here's a couple of acres. From Running Man, Arnold.
Oh man, I just watched that the other day for the first time in a really long time, man.
Mm-hmm. Hero, actually.
Fucking Richard Dawson.
There was one scene where I forget what. There was one scene where it was a guy flying through it's because it's all his one-liners, and there's one I missed that was where a guy's flying through the air. Yeah. And the girl goes, "Jesus Christ," and he goes, "I don't think so."
Or Sub-Zero, just plain zero.
Oh, no. What happened to Buzzsaw? He got the split.
We're here to talk about a prog album.
Yes.
And Eric said right before we went on that he's been trying to get me to listen to this album for 40 years. Now, I don't remember that, so either I'm blacking it out, or I don't listen to anything he says, or I just didn't want to. So,
yeah,
Eric, take it away.
No, I mean, I first heard this record right when it came out, and it was one of my breakthrough albums at the time. And being that we were such ELO fans. I was always kind of trying to get you and our mutual friend John to check out some of this stuff that I was, like I was into Yes, I got into Genesis, I got into, a little bit of Floyd and, that kind of thing. And every time I said, yeah, you like ELO, there's like early stuff, ELO that is technically I call it prog, but, I figured, well, check some of this stuff out. And you never really seemed like you were interested at the time.
Exactly. And
yeah,
you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And once we get through the stats, I'll tell you why. Because there's a reason for everything. and it's not your fault, but if I wanted to, I could blame you, but you wouldn't know why I didn't want to listen to it.
Mm.
Okay. And then
that's fair.
Then we did an album of the top 5 drum songs, and Chris picked a track off of this album.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, you did. Didn't you pick Tempest Fugit?
I didn't.
No, I picked Tempest Fugit for our Harmony episode.
I thought you picked it. I thought Chris picked it.
I picked Heart of the Sunrise for that one.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, Tempest Fugit came around somewhere.
Yeah, it was when we did our Harmony episode.
Okay.
And
almost 250 episodes in. I can't. What do you expect? What do you want? I can't remember every episode.
I'm not saying anything.
I mean, I will say Tempest Fugit might be one of my favorite Yes songs. It's actually a very special song to me. So
okay, so we'll get to that too. So let's get into the stats. If we do that, if you're new to the show, we kind of give you some statistical information. This way you could tuck it away in your brain. If you ever have trivia or someone asks you a question, you can kind of hopefully pull this out. But here we go. The album is Drama by Yes. It was released in August of 1980. Produced by Yes and Eddie Offord. Briefly, he was only associated with it, so they ended up giving him credit for producing like the backing vocals or something like that. There were 2 singles released off this album, Into the Lens and Run Through the Light, and neither one of those did anything. All the songs are written by Yes collectively in one form or another. Hit number 18 on Billboard, which isn't bad, but for a Yes album, not really in the track record that they were used to. They really were top 10, 2, 5, 4. Yeah. Always kind of, even with their most eclectic and esoteric stuff, would still be charting very well. Sales, you know what? On the Wikipedia, there's no chart.
It didn't certify in the United States.
I was able to find out approximately, and it's probably more since then. But yeah, it did not reach gold status, which would be 500,000. Apparently, the number's around 300,000 copies sold. That data was not officially released by Yes as well. And then finally, much to the chagrin of Jan or Jan Wenner from Rolling Stone, they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2017 after much pushback of why aren't prog groups getting inducted into the Hall of Fame, because Jan Wenner had a particular axe to grind.
Yeah.
Yes, finally got in 2017.
Yeah, 2 years after Chris Squire died, the only guy to play in every lineup of the band.
Yeah. So too bad. All right, where do we want to start? Let's do a little history first, and then we'll get in. Well, I'll kick it over to you guys because you guys have a more of a history with it than I do, and then I'll talk a little bit about my brief history with it. But so basically, the lineup at this point, or the classic lineup for Yes it was really John Anderson, Chris Squire, Steve Howe, Rick Wakeman. And they had a couple of Bill Bruford was in there, and they kind of swapped drummers a little bit. But John Anderson is the voice of Yes, like hit that high, kind of high range. It's not like he doesn't sing falsetto; he just has a really high range. Yeah. So they, and they became known for that, Roundabout and Long Distance Runaround, and then they became known for albums that are basically like 2 songs on one album. One side each, or double album. I think Relayer, right, was a double album with
Tales from Topographic Oceans was a double album.
It was a double album, but it was like 4 songs or
4 songs.
But Relayer also had 3 tracks.
Yeah. Relayer and Close to the Edge have the same format.
Yeah. So safe to say, Yes got into really long form progressive rock, really long form progressive rock. They were not afraid to stretch that boundary and say, we just want to make complete thoughts on each side. Or if we weren't bound by albums at the time, we would like it to be one whole thing, whole piece of music. They really were going that way. And that, Rick Wakeman kind of came and left because he just wasn't happy with that. He came back, and then, Patrick Moraz, who we talked about in the Moody Blues, Eric, he came in for an album. Was it Going for the One? I think he was on.
No, Relayer.
No, he was on Relayer.
Relayer. He left, and then Rick Wakeman comes back. They made Going for the One, then Tormato. We can't say Tormato. It's everything I've seen online, and they're like Tormato. So I have to, digress to the English way of saying it. And at that point, so that's like 78, right? They're starting to, so they're like, okay, we're going to come together for our next album. And there was tensions were high already. It seems to me that Rick Wakeman is kind of flaky. Very, very touchy, very like not like he, things like set him off. It seems to be maybe impatient because he had already quit once and he came back. And, he was, I was reading that when Alan White's recording his drums, he's throwing peanuts at him and trying to annoy, just be like a bastard. It's like, like there's no need for that. Yeah. And I guess things, just tensions were, that's how the tensions were, I guess, kind of revealing themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I think what happened during those rehearsals, they had a rehearsal session with Roy Thomas Baker and John Anderson and Rick Wakeman came in with songs that the others weren't as happy about because they were a little bit more of a lighter acoustic fare.
Yeah, more folksy.
Right. And I think they were just kind of like back and forth about, and they wanted to make them more heavy and a little bit more rockin' and that kind of stuff. And I think they just were unhappy with the musical direction.
They were, I think they were heading, they were already embracing the changes that were taking place.
Yeah.
The three, Howe, Squire and White were looking ahead, and they Anderson and Wakeman, they wanted to very much stay in that very mystical kind of folky, but place. And those sessions were very sort of like fractured. Like very fractured that way. And the music, I dare say, was quite dull. Listening to it, because I heard some of those the snippets of those sessions, and it just wouldn't have made for very, even with that lineup, a really good album. Whether or not it was the production, I don't know who was to blame there, but it just felt like it was very disjointed. And I think both Anderson and Wakeman agreed that they would not. This isn't really the band that it's not.
Yeah, they weren't happy. They were just
weren't happy. Yeah, so they decided to fly the coop, which
so they just kind of leave. Yes, and John Anderson has been the voice of the group. I mean, and he's a very distinctive voice.
Yeah, not many people have that tone of voice.
Yeah, he's not a typical lead singer.
Right.
That would be like Freddie Mercury leaving Queen. Like this very specific, plant. There are very specific kind of sounds, especially in the 70s. He was like literally the voice of prog. You could say because that stuff got played. Like I never heard like Peter Gabriel Genesis stuff on like WNEW in the 70s, but I heard Roundabout and all that, like the big Yes songs I heard. So when you think prog, I think Yes is probably one of the first words that will come out of your mouth when you're like, it's probably like, yes.
I would probably say Yes and King Crimson are probably I guess proggiest, if that's a word,
absolutely the proggiest of prog. So Wakeman and John Anderson leave, and so you're left with the three core people, Squire, Howe, and Alan White. So they're just kind of noodling around and doing stuff. And then oddly enough, a group in the late 70s kind of came around called the Buggles. And very kind of forward looking. Trevor Horn, me finding this album aligned perfectly because I was just starting to go down a Trevor Horn rabbit hole, and now I'm going to go even deeper.
Okay.
But they're known for Video Killed the Radio Star and all that stuff. But Trevor Horn was also kind of treading water in that as well. He wasn't sure what, he really wasn't like overly comfortable with that kind of stuff, being the lead guy, but he was, and he played bass and they had that, that album out. But turns out their management, they got new management, and that manager also managed Yes.
Yep. Brian Lane.
The manager's like, hey, you guys want to maybe write a couple of songs for Yes, like just kind of like, not with any other intention, but hey, maybe you can give them some stuff that, inspire or whatever. So they get together and they literally like two bands get fused, which I don't know. Has that ever happened? Not a super group, because this isn't a super group. This is like a fusion of a band literally coming into another band and assimilating, right? Like literally the Yes is like the Borg.
Yeah.
And they like the Buggles came in and they assimilated the Buggles into Yes.
And rather quickly, I might add.
I was going to say, yeah, it was very fast.
It was very fast. They were, I think they were like studios side by side. They were both working on material.
Early 1980.
And they invited them over and they was like, hey, what are you guys up to? What are you doing? And they were, so they, next thing they know, they're asking them to join. And that, for me, but Yes has that history of that sort of revolving door of people just coming and going, like,
they really do.
Largely due to ego, you come to find out. But I always figured like then this was what they did. This is like part of the criteria for being in this band. Like we make an album. The next thing we're going to do something a little different. So maybe you're out, like much like maybe the Alan Parsons Project or Steely Dan in that regard.
Exactly.
But in this case, I think it was more about ego and just the fact that these guys were so. All these like the Eagles in a sense, like too many Chiefs and not, you know what I mean? So that sometimes things worked, sometimes things didn't work. So yeah,
especially in a band like Yes, where everybody's a virtuoso, right? I mean, Rick Wakeman is like, in his lane, and Steve Howe is a maestro guitarist, and John Anderson's a vocalist that no one has heard, before, and Chris Squire, so you literally have so many. You're right, you have so many big musicians with ideas that they want to explore, and at some point, but John Anderson leaving was like the biggest. That's like,
oh yeah,
that's not a rotating musician. That is literally the voice of Yes leaving.
Yeah, so he was one of the founding members. So it was a big blow, especially people in the UK when they toured this record. US, I mean, people didn't seem to mind in the US. They kind of they dug it.
They embraced it. They played 3 nights at the Garden.
Yeah.
Well, the thing about that was that tour was
booked,
sold out before all these changes happened. So
but I mean, I read an article in Prague Magazine about it. Nobody really was like, "What the fuck is this?" when they came out. Though they actually they got a pretty warm reception in the US, which made them unprepared for the way the UK reacted when they got back to the UK.
Yeah, very loyal. So the Buggles are Trevor Horn and Geoff Downes, bassist and a keyboardist, and just kind of they're making that kind of post-punk pop music, really on the frontier of what the 80s would bring. Yeah. And like Eric said, in 1980, in early 1980, John Anderson, I think they were still kind of like demoing or still fooling around with stuff. And I looked at a video from Top of the Pops yesterday or the day before from like February or January of 1980 with the Buggles performing a song. So the Buggles were still a unit performing in earlier in the year from when this came out. This came out in August of 1980. So we're recording this in September. So it's 45 years ago. Yeah. But in early 1980, the Buggles were still active, and they continued to be an active group afterwards. Chris,
I was going to say, and keep in mind that this record came out in 80, MTV debut. Everybody talks about the Buggles because they were the first video on MTV. That was a year later. So the video Killed the Radio Star really didn't become a hit until a year after they recorded Drama and went on tour with Yes.
Yeah, so strange. Yeah. So you get this group that melds together, I was always we'll get into why. Well, let's get into why I didn't listen to Yes, because I'm not a huge John Anderson fan. Like he wears out pretty quick. Because of the high register of his voice, there's not really any variation. It's kind of like it's always in the same kind of high register. The material. I was listening to some Yes stuff today. It's about a minstrel, and I opened a book and went in. It's like okay, like that stuff doesn't like it doesn't. Like I'm okay with it, but it doesn't resonate with me like long term. Like I was going through and listening to stuff from Relayer, and then I went to Close to the Edge, and I did Fragile, and it's kind of like, I kind of got and the fucking church organs from like Rick Wakeman. It's like that I don't want that kind of.
I love all that stuff.
It's understandable. It is.
Like,
it's
always overblown. Like I was like, I know the hits, but I'm good. Eric gave me Genesis, and I'm grateful for that,
Well, I dare say that Drama was my first. It was this album was my gateway. And I didn't know that Trevor Horn was not John Anderson, and the reason for that is Chris Squire. He's the link in that harmony vocal. It sounded just enough like John Anderson, where when Chris Squire sings with him, it sounds like Yes.
Yes,
and I think I made that point on that harmony episode. That's why it chose that as an honorable mention. I made that point specifically about Chris Squire and why it sounded like the band, and so I had no idea. I thought it was the same guy, the same people, So, but I can, I understand. Like going back, it took a lot of getting used to. Like it was very jarring, long-winded, like kind of stuff. Like when I heard, of course, I loved Roundabout and Long Distance Runaround, but to hear like Heart of the Sunrise for the first time, or
20 minutes,
but now my personal favorite of the band is Close to the Edge. I love that record. I think it's it's probably the best of that lineup in my opinion.
It's a masterpiece.
Yeah. So that's why I stayed away, because I'm like, damn. Yeah. So then we have that episode, and Eric talks about Drama, and I remember him mentioning Yes, Drama. Like, the good thing about Yes is most of their early stuff is like one word album titles.
Yes.
So it's not hard to remember, except for Going for the One and Close to the Edge, but everything else is pretty much one word. Mm-hmm. So I remembered it, and then I went and listened to the song that he mentioned, and I'm a big Trevor Horn fan. Yeah. I've his production, like Frankie Goes to Hollywood is one of the best produced albums of the 80s. And he apparently really took it over and kind of replaced. Steve Howe even plays on that album.
Mm-hmm. I didn't know that.
So when I heard that, when I found out that, this is Trevor Horn, then I became more interested, because I'm like, okay, I want to hear something different. And then when I heard that song, just like this was totally a Peter Gabriel, Phil Collins Genesis thing. Right. Yeah. Like the voice leaves the group. So how do we replicate that? Right. How do we kind of do that? We're not trying to fool people, but that's really there's a certain expectation. Yeah. So like you said, Trevor Horn is not that high of a range, although in Run Through the Light, he really is trying to like a solo vocal, and he's really trying to hit that upper register. And that was part of the problem with their touring. Was he was not able to consistently that was really running roughshod over his vocals. Yeah. But then, like you said, you put Chris Squire on top, and I'm listening to this album, I'm like, oh my God. The same thing. I'm like, this, especially for a layman when it comes to Yes, I'm like, this could pass, for the real thing, So that kind of got me into it. But then this album is totally different. Right. This is Yes, entering the 80s. Right.
For sure. It's definitely an outlier in the sense that it's unique. No other Yes album sounds like it, and at least not to my, maybe Fly From Here, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Yes. That's a really good album. It's because it has this lineup. But they're trying to do like vintage Yes on that record. They're going longer. Like there's the entire first side is a suite. Yeah. Yep. But imagine that with this lineup. So it was really cool. How ironically it was, they had released the album with a brand new singer.
Yeah.
At the time, I don't know how to pronounce his name. Was it Benoit or Benoit? Benoit. Okay,
Benoit, David. I thought it was Benoit.
And he has that kind of upper register voice as well. But for whatever reason, I think he fell ill or something. He had a lot of health issues or something to that effect. And they re-released the album a few years later for I think it was their 50th anniversary or something. And the band, I think it was Alan White that said, hey, because Trevor Horn produced it. Trevor Horn, they brought him back. Jeff Downes was now back in the band after being with Asia all of this time. Right. So I'm like, why the hell is Jeff Downes again? But I think it was because he had started working with Trevor Horn again.
Yeah.
and they were writing songs again. And then, so
reformed, and they were kind of around and touring.
Right. So the bulk of that album is that pairing again. So they were like, okay, let's bring back that lineup again. So it's Alan White's idea to say, hey, why don't you just re-record the vocals, Trevor Horn, and really make it like go back to that classic lineup. Maybe we can tour it. And they toured it. And yeah, at the time I thought it was kind of a dick thing to do. But it's his stuff. It's his material. He wrote it.
Yes,
he produced it. So why not? He's like, okay. And it's a much better album as a result. And, but getting back to drama, I think the album itself is just, it's that merging of the two, which just seems to, it just, for me, it just worked. I don't know. I don't think that at the time people considered it. I think it was, people hated it. It did divide some fandom. But now, you go on the message boards and people are loving it now.
Yeah. They're like,
yeah, this album is like, it was so underrated. I didn't even appreciate it back in the day. Like, I wish I had, and blah. I'm glad to say that I thought I was the one that was like, I have such shitty taste in music that I happen to like their worst album at this point. Yeah. But it was brand new and I had never heard anything like it. This nerdy kid of 13, of course it appealed to me. I'd be listening to this record while there's an open copy of Heavy Metal Magazine sitting next to me, thumbing through all the sci-fi fantasy shit. That's what appealed to me about it. Was this kind of stuff. But this was it. This was the gateway for me into that. So Chris, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, that's okay, man. No, what I was going to say is, this record's gone through such a renaissance in recent years that, Yes has actually gone out and toured the whole record. They've played the whole thing from top to bottom in the years since John Anderson's been out of the band. So it's definitely been reassessed in history.
All right. Well, let's get into it. I mean, let me start off in a word. This album's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
This album is amazing. And that's coming from like the least proggy guy here. And I want to do a fun exercise a little bit later. So you're going to need to put your thinking caps on, but
yeah,
from the, I was listening to Tormato, cause I like to do that, especially when there's a big change. I want to hear what was coming before.
Yeah.
And like Eric said, even Tormato, there just wasn't any spark. It was kind of like, all right, yeah. It's like
at that point, yes. After
songs are kind of up tempo, but I'm like,
right.
I don't feel anything,
Yeah.
With this album, there's like an urgency.
Mm-hmm.
There's an energy. There's a sense of direction. It almost seems like, or let me put this as a question to both of you. Was this a necessary, even though it didn't, they weren't fired, Anderson and Wakeman weren't fired from the group. They left. But was this I feel like this was a necessary move that allowed them to evolve into the 80s, which then set them up for 90125.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like that same situation where a lot of people think like Jason Newsted had to quit Metallica in order for Metallica to get their shit together and move forward.
Yeah.
And, that kind of thing. So it's almost like these guys left and they were kind of like reinvigorated and by the Buggles. But I think what you're saying is true also just in terms of the music itself. To me, I know we keep coming back to the idea of Hinge albums, and I know this doesn't necessarily sound like anything Yes did before, but it also fits. And it is one of those records where it's a lot. What came before is logical, but what comes after is also very logical. So yeah, I definitely think you need this to move forward. But again, it also, because of what Anderson and Wakeman were trying to do before they left, them leaving allowed them to do the other three to do the things they wanted to do, which again did let the band move forward.
Yeah. The irony here is though that wasn't really their intent. Though they didn't move forward after this album, after that tour, and because they were so poorly received in the UK. I think the tour ended rather abruptly, and then they just sort of disbanded after that. Downs and Horn would try go into the studio and make that second album. One of the songs, of course, is Into the Lens, with its I Am a Camera.
Camera.
Yeah, which is their version is also really good.
Yeah,
It's very funky, very sort of very new wave, very 80s, very, but I love it.
You know who did a cover of it as well?
Who's that?
Kim Carnes, Betty Davis Eyes.
No kidding, really?
Yeah, she did a version. Hers, she didn't do Into the Lens. She did I Am a Camera.
Is it Trevor Horn? Did he produce it? Or
no, it was on her album from like 1985. It was left off, and it showed up as a bonus track. Actually, pretty good.
Wow.
She did a nice job. But what I'm saying, Eric, is not that this album kind of brought like this album allowed them to shed what was becoming an anchor of John Anderson and Rick Wakeman, right? Like it allowed Yes to, even though this lineup, quote unquote, wasn't successful, it allowed them to reconfigure their sound. It allowed them to modernize their sound. So this way, when they do encounter Trevor Rabin and cinema and that whole thing, the table was already set. Like we've already left behind.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The stuff we were doing in the 70s. So that's what I mean by like, I felt like this, it was almost, I almost feel like a baseball team, right? And John Anderson and Rick Wakeman are two of your best hitters, but you sit them out, like you bench them, and the team still wins. Like I kind of felt like this is what happened is like those guys left of their own accord. And they're like, we're not feeling it. They make this album, which is really at the time strange, but incredibly excellent. Mm-hmm. And then when Yes reconvenes, John Anderson comes back and the rules have kind of changed then. Right. We're not going back to that. Like that stuff was the 70s. It really was. It was very much of its time.
Yeah, it is.
And we can't go back to that. So I think it kind of gave John Anderson room to kind of breathe and kind of maybe assess the changing times, because, I think if they had their way, the fact that the 80s came wouldn't have meant anything to Yes. They would have just kind of kept going. Whereas other groups, consciously, we saw it with Yes and Genesis. Other groups consciously tried to change and say we need to reconfigure, but it seemed like those two were really resistant. And when they weren't feeling it, they just decided to leave.
And yet somehow John Anderson always found his way back into the band. And
he did.
Like, this wouldn't not be the first time he leaves the band. Like there were times where he actually got kicked out of the band.
Yep.
Forcefully, like, they were splintered into two different factions, and this is whole
business Anderson, with Wakeman, Bruford, Howe, and then he wanted to use the Yes name, and Chris Squire wouldn't let him, and
it blows my mind that period of the band when Steve Howe and Jeff Downs, of course, they formed, they helped form Asia. They do that thing, and so that at that point Steve Howe is gone as well. I think Jeff Downs, much to Trevor Horn's chagrin, I don't think he was very happy that Jeff Downs did that.
Yeah.
As I recall, I think they had kind of a little bit of a falling out there, and that's when Trevor Horn, that's when he turned around and became a producer. Like that was the career path that he set for himself at that point. Yeah. But it's weird how, like, you think Steve Howe is loyal to one particular version of Yes, and yet he goes off and does this thing with Anderson and Wakeman, and and I think Tony Levin played bass on that record, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he did.
So which it's all these people, like, coming and going, and this and like, and then there was that disaster of an album, Union, that both bands, both factions were like, it was so manufactured and so like, and the only bridge to saying that it's a complete album is the fact that Chris Squire lent vocals to some of the stuff that Rabin was doing at that point. And I think John Anderson lent his vocals to the stuff that, like it was just sort of back and forth kind of thing. It was just so bizarre. And yet they toured.
I was going to say that was what it was. It was a vehicle for the tour. I mean, let's be honest. They allowed them to go out on the road.
The most bizarre thing you could ever see is to have all of them on stage together. Two drummers, two bass players, two guitar players, two keyboardists. I mean, it had to have been a mess. I can't
the live album
that sounded good.
The live album that came from it isn't bad. I will say. I mean, it's not. It was on Spotify for a little while. That live record, it's not terrible, but I mean, it's a greatest hits tour. It's not anything where they're doing breaking any new ground. I mean,
it
cash grab for sure.
All right, let's get back into drama because I really want to talk about this album. The good thing about it, there's only 6 songs, and one of the songs is 1 minute and 20 seconds long. which, if you're doing the math, that means there's got to be a long song to.
Sure, there's a couple of them.
Out, but the album starts off with Machine Messiah, which is a 10-minute song, but it doesn't feel like it.
That's a great tune.
This album kicks the door in. It announces something different. It is so guitar forward, and I think that's probably because Geoff Downes was not Rick Wakeman, right? And
right.
Didn't have that overbearing thing of I need to put all this stuff in here. He was kind of like, well, I'm the new guy, and keyboard playing in the 80s wasn't that all that bombastic stuff. It was a little bit more refined. He was sampling and using the vocoder and using it as an enhancement. And I think that gave Steve Howe really an opportunity just to like a lawnmower, just kind of crank the cord and just let it rip.
This is the heaviest you will ever hear Steve Howe play is on this record. And he's using solid body guitars, I think, for the most part. And he's just getting much more of a hard rock sound than he ever got on any other record he did before this one. It's really that's one of the
steel
things
pedal and all that kind of stuff, like those notes that it's almost
so good.
It's like into the stratosphere, like some of the notes that he's getting out of the that thing, and it's just some of the finest playing I've ever heard.
And the drums are so heavy on that track. The bombacity.
Yeah, I mean they're all cooking on this album. I mean that's the thing that immediately struck me when I started listening to it is. This sounded like a band on a mission. Like it almost sounded like a new band. Like we're hungry. We need to prove something. Cause it seemed that's what I was getting. That's what made me so excited when I was listening to this. I'm like, this music is so active.
Yeah.
Like rock music can get long, it can slow down or it just gets like kind of, this was just not letting up. Like the movements of the song were carrying you through to the next part of it, and there was just so much to pick apart between, I mean, Chris Squire is in fucking beast mode on this album. He must have been in a cage, and then they'll just like let him out.
Oh, he's
honestly, like he is just like ripping through riffs. Also, just everything is just complementing each other, and it sounds modern, which I guess is what I'm trying to say. Is I guess I like my prog modern. I guess is what I'm learning.
I get you. I've been kind of, Dean, I've been kind of realizing that myself. Like a lot of my favorite stuff, it pretty much all came out at the same time. It's like those 80 to 82, a plethora of stuff just was hitting me in the face. All that stuff that Genesis was doing it at the time. Yeah. Gabriel with his soul, that third and fourth album. Yes, Drama. My favorite lineup of King Crimson is the Adrian Belew, Tony Levin lineup with Fripp and Bruford. Those 3 albums that they made, those are my favorite records of that group. So yeah, I mean, to embracing the sort of new wave and combining that with, still doing the noodling, still doing those kinds of things. Even Rush at this point.
They stripped it back. Yep.
I love Signals. I love Subdivisions. I really dug the whole, like when Geddy Lee was starting to play that synthesizer. I like that shit. I kind of dug it. It got a little long, winded, but just sort of kind of wore itself out. But those first couple of albums they did with that stuff, I dug it. So I guess it's safe to say that for me, that was the starting point. And then of course, let's not forget what ELO was doing at this point with Time and Secret Messages. They were, still, you really couldn't call it jangly pop or anything like, it's, to me, it's still, I'm still going to maintain that they're very much on that prog.
Yeah. They're on, you could put them on they're a swing on the pendulum. They're somewhere on there.
Yeah.
But I think, this album was produced by Yes, but I'm going to guess that Trevor Horn probably had the most to do with the production of it, because that was he was already producing for his band. And and you could say, well, what's the difference between this album and Tormato? The production is different.
It's right? It's like much brighter.
So
and I've come to find out that Hugh Padgham was actually.
I was going to say, don't forget Hugh Padgham was the engineer. Yeah,
and he was engineering it. So man, you're getting like the all stars in here to make an album that I want to like. I actively want to listen to this album because the original recording, not the remaster, it just sounds so great.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's part, you know, with prog music or music that's going to be quote unquote challenging. I think you have to have some things stacked on your side. You got to have some check boxes already ticked to like really kind of go in there, you know. And so for me, it was Trevor Horn, right?
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was like as soon as I heard it, this more modern sounding, it immediately captivated me. You know, I was really kind of, you know, it took me by surprise, and so much so that I ended up buying the vinyl. I was at a record show. I texted Chris the day. I said,
that was really cool. Yeah,
I got ELO. I got the ELO on the third day, the English version with Jeff Lynne on the cover only, and then I got Drama.
Yeah, it's a great. That's awesome.
Because I picked out because I was, and that's how far back that was. Like what, I don't know, like June or something like that, maybe even earlier. Because it really grabbed me, and the whole album as a whole, and just what they were trying to do. They were trying to like, okay, we need to. It was kind of like Moneyball. If you ever seen the movie Moneyball, where the A's lose all their players, and Brad Pitt's like, we need to recreate, you know, these players that we lost. And that's what they did with Chris Squire and Trevor Horn. Like Trevor Horn was close enough. And then, with Chris Squire, it's like, okay, this is good, but actually it's I dare say a little bit better because of Trevor Horn's slightly lower range. It kind of brings it, you know, it kind of grounds it a little bit more. And then Chris Squire could hang out on the top and replicate the kind of the high end of John Anderson. So and this is like, for me, this is prog as it should be. It's kind of moving and dynamic. Yeah. That's what I like out of my prog. I want kind of things to keep moving, and this is like a riff fest. Steve Howe is just kind of throwing off stuff, and from what I understand, he recorded all of his stuff at home. Yeah. So like he had everything. They recorded everything. So I'm going to do my stuff at home. And
yeah.
Oh, really?
Separate studio in England. He went on. Yeah. He was recording most of his.
Yeah. It's like, I'll come up with my stuff, and you would never know though, right? Because he inserts it just so easily.
And I think I think you hit it on the head when you say that the production is what cements this album in terms of it not, because it could very well, it could have been a sort of a patchwork kind of, effort where you got the Buggles, what they sound like, what Yes sounds like. But I think they somehow cemented that seamlessly together. So it does feel like the band is working in unison when they weren't necessarily working in unison, because like we just said, like Steve Howe was doing his own thing. They were, kind of bringing in their own parts and everything. So, yeah.
I also think part of it too is that by the time Trevor Horn came in, that the other three had a lot of the skeletons of the songs written. Yeah. And so when he came in, they kind of knocked it out quick. I think it was only like 2 or 3 months to record the record or something to that effect. So that I think that contributes to the sense of urgency and the fact that it's not really over thunk or anything like that. And I think that's what gives it that vibe, that powerful vibe, or that upbeat vibe, or that urgent vibe, is because they did it so quick. It wasn't this overwrought thing or this overcooked album that came out.
I like it because it moves, and my favorite type of prog isn't the kind of like weighed down heavy stuff like Dean was referring to. My favorite kind of prog is very rhythmic. I love bass and drums, and that needs to happen. I love that those sort of jazz influences that came into working with these sort of pompous, like more, I dare say more classical like players, that when they merged together and they did something unique like that, that was, to me, the song has to flow. It has to move. It needs room to breathe. Whether it's the old stuff or in this case, the new stuff, which is more, slightly more rock oriented. And that's not a problem.
No. And you get, and this album moves. Does it really happen? I'm like,
yeah.
You know, and then on their next album would be "It Could Happen to You." So they're asking, does it happen? And then they answer themselves, "It could happen to you." So they kind of
both have that tremendous bass lines in both songs.
Bass line is so that intro bass line on that song is so awesome.
Yeah, it's just and that's just a pop. It's kind of poppy and proggy at the same time. It checks off a lot of boxes. But again, it's just everybody working, like you said, everybody working in unison, even if they're recording separately, just kind of like, Trevor Horn understands the mission, and Geoff Downes is like, we're not coming in to bring the Buggles. And that was the thing with Trevor Horn. I read that he's like, they asked me, I was asked to join Yes. And he's like, I didn't know how to feel about it, but when is that ever going to happen again? Like, when am I ever going to get an opportunity like this again?
That's right. Yeah.
So let me, so he was on board to, acquiesce to be, to Yes. Right. Like, not saying, well, we're the Buggles and we're gonna bring the Buggles stuff. They brought Buggles sensibility to stuff. Geoff Downes certainly did, right? Because he was again on the forefront of technology with the Fairlight and the vocoder. And I love the use of the vocoder on this album. Just like like it's just it adds, it gives that extra like futuristic thing to it, a vocoder, and just on. On Tempest Fusion with the yes.
Yeah, that you hit it right. I mean, that's what I always love about Downes in general. Even with the Buggles, he has that very spacey synth, and yet there's that underlying. I always love that piano of his too. Like that, there's sort of an underpinning of piano, like Into the Lens. When he's it's just the vocal and piano, and that's very Buggles right there.
Yeah.
But then the rest of the band kicks in with the heavier stuff.
That's my favorite track is Into the Lens. Is a masterpiece. Yeah. Everyone would say probably Tempest Fusion, but Into the Lens is perfect. It starts off interesting. It builds, and the vocals get more urgent when they're like, I am a camera. Like towards the end, they're really, him and Chris Squire are really singing it, and they're really like with a lot of velocity in the vocals towards the end, and you're getting this crescendo, and it's like, I am a camera, like the vocoder is going on, and then they're coming back and singing.
It's a nice touch.
And then everything kind of recedes again, like it kind of slows down, and then it picks up again. I'm like, this is like, that's what I love about music, like that kind of stuff. Got like, I was listening to it today. I'm like, oh my God, these guys are really just ripping the vocals at the end. Like there's that buildup. It's not just, we're gonna re-sing some of the verses and the chorus. Steve Howe, his riffs are getting quicker, and they're moving up a half step. They're getting higher. Like everybody is just kind of building up this tension together, almost the way like Stairway to Heaven does. Right, it builds to this crescendo, and then it kind of falls, and this song kind of does that too. It kind of falls, but then it takes off again. Go ahead, Chris. Sorry. I
was going to say another song that's, just to speak to the, the contributions of the Buggles is Run Into the Light. Trevor Horn actually plays bass on that. He plays fretless bass, and credit to Chris Squire to say, who's like, the king of the bass when it comes to Yes, to lean back and say, you do this, and that fretless bass gives something really unique to the song and really unique to the band. That's not something you would typically hear on a Yes track.
I love that track too. It's very, very sort of, to me, I mean, and what I like about this album is like, it felt ahead of its time, in a sense that and time is the key word here. When there's a lot of references to time flying and memories and things like that. So you're already listening to an album that is already nostalgic in that way. So when I listen to it nowadays and I'm thinking back, because when I first heard it, it was like, and that's what appealed to me about it, was the constant referencing of time and how it, like, it's in that case, they're looking forward. Now I'm listening to it and I'm thinking, well, I'm looking back on this thing, and they were already like talking about this stuff, like, and that's, again, I consider it somewhat of those reoccurring themes informs that concept of time. Tempest Fusion, time flies, Into the Lens, like memories, and
capturing a moment,
capturing moments. I am a camera. It sounds cheesy on the surface.
It works.
I am a camera, but it gets very emotional. It's like you understand what they're really singing about there, so
it's interesting that he decided to take another crack at it as the
Yeah.
Buggles,
right,
and kind of he deprogified it, and I don't mean
I like it. It's very funky.
I gotta go find
it's
that
more.
now.
It has a much more funkier vibe, and it's very 80s, very sort of like
much more sedate. He was able to I don't say he reimagined it, right? So obviously he wrote that song and probably had the most part of it.
And his voice is lower too. He sings in a lower register on that version.
It's a little more melancholy.
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
The Yes version is much more up tempo. I love his vocal on it.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people giving him grief, like, oh, he's not John Anderson. No, he's not. But
he's got a great voice.
And if you find they recorded for Westwood One on the drama tour, you can find tapes of the shows.
Uh-huh.
I think he does a really good job covering. I mean, and he had to sing in a register he's not used to singing. He covered the John Anderson era stuff fine. I didn't see anything wrong with how he sung those songs at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this we've said it in the past, Eric. I think some albums have timers on them, and this one, much like ELO's Time album at the time, it was derided, and now people look back on it, and I think this album too. Like you said, when I read comments about it, and people are like, oh my God, this is like my favorite, or my top 2, or my top 5, or even back then I was into it. So I think it was a grower, not a shower. I think Time would
very kind to it.
Would show that they were ahead of the curve, and the 3 core members understood the mission. Like when they decided to reform, even though they didn't know what was going to happen after this, and what was to happen, but the 3 core members were kind of like, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to change things, or to stretch out a little bit, because we don't have to worry about the folksy stuff, and that we can kind of bring a breath of fresh air in. And like I said, it doesn't seem like Downs and Horn really tried to really force their way through. They kind of assimilated in. You don't hear really any big solos from Geoff Downs. He's more kind of filling in the patch, like filling in the gaps with stuff, right? And creating that layer and creating that foundation so they can lay this bass, which is so sharp sounding. That little
Rickenbacker bass, man. Damn.
Man. Like it's everything.
Yeah, and then the guitar is doubling. It's like little. I'm like, holy! My head was going to explode, And then they're like, I am.
Yeah.
Like it's just, and the stakes kept getting higher and higher. Then the riffs came back, and I'm like, this is just it was exciting to me.
There's also that one moment, like I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's how or if it's a keyboard. There's that sort of like on Does It Really Happen, when it goes and there's that sort of watery effect. You know what I'm talking about? Like that. I think it's is it how? Like
I think it's how doubled with Downs. I think they're playing the same line.
Yeah, it almost sounds like he's playing.
They play together. Yeah,
they're playing like it's like he's playing underwater or something. It has that really nice texture to it, and it's some really great sonic sounds on this record. And like you say, Downs just kind of like lays it in, but he's doing some funky stuff on the organ there too on that song. Does It Really Happen too? There's a little bit of that going on in the background, but not overwhelming the song. Yeah. But it just adds that another little flavor to it. But yeah, I just love the sound of his keyboards. It always like gets me, even like the opening notes to Video Killed the Radio Star. There's that ding, ding, and that piano, that underlining piano. It's such a distinct. I immediately think of the 80s, right? It informs the sound of the 80s right then and there. That's it. It's like, yeah.
Right. And then to close out the album is Tempest Fusion.
Yeah.
Which is another just like
so good.
That bass line.
Embarrassment of riches, this album, it really is. It really is. It's the vocals again, the same thing. It's just everything matches, and like I said, that whole refrain of yes, yes, and then that shows up in the lyrics. Get the answer to yes. It's like again, this is
about. They're talking about it. Could be incredibly cheesy that they're actually saying the name of the band, or but it's not. It's like they're singing about life and again time, and the moments you tell me yes, like how those things that are important to you and that kind of thing. It evokes emotion, and and it like if you were just to listen with half an ear or half-ass, you'd be thinking, what the hell? They're just singing yes because they're named Yes, but that's not the case at all. The lyrics are actually quite intelligent. I mean, they're very they're very deep on this record, deeper than you would think. But yeah.
Yeah, that song is actually how I discovered this album. When I was 16, I started learning how to play the bass guitar.
Okay.
And the guy and my bass teacher, I got him through my choir teacher, who was a big prog guy. So my bass teacher knew I was into Yes and all that stuff. So he goes, well, I'm going to make learning scales less boring. And he taught me the bass line to drama, so I would practice scales, but I wouldn't get bored with it. And when I got fast enough, I could play along with the song. And that's how I discovered that there was this Outlier Yes album with John Anderson not singing, because then my father, my dad being my dad, oh yeah, that's from this and this and this and this. And then I remember going into because I went to Stepinac and White Plains, I would always hang out in that Sam Ash on Mamaroneck Avenue, and it was still there. And I picked up a bass and I was working it out. And then one of the music store guys came up behind me and plugged the bass in and started just like he was trying to show up the 16-year-old kid who's still trying to learn how to play the bass guitar.
Yeah, that's I got to say that's pretty ballsy of your teacher. Is like, oh yeah, you're gonna learn Tempest Fusion as
Yeah,
I
mean, I didn't like it is. It's a scale. It literally is. It's the same. It's a kind of scale you would learn as you're learning to play. And Chris Squire just like hot rodded the shit out of it. But
just, how I discovered this record, funnily enough, is again with Tempest Fusion. There was, I don't know if you guys remember, Dean, if you remember, I forget the guy's name that made these albums, but they would do like they would play music as like it's like a parody, like they would do like a skit. But they would play songs like, and that was like that informed the skit. Like it was like, that was kind of like the dialogue of the skit was like, they just play little snippets of songs. And one of the songs, you know what I'm talking about? Like, they did, I think they did one for Jaws. They did one for,
Dental Camp. It was Dickie Goodman.
Dickie. Okay. Yes. Okay. So that was Glenn, or my friend Glenn had that record. And or he had a recording of somehow of it, and one of the songs they used was Tempest Fusion. They do 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 do. It was like, and I was like, what the hell was that? And then the album had just come out, and he had just bought the record, and he put it on, and he's like, oh, that's Yes. I'm like, really? So we played it, and I fucking loved it, and I just instantly, got it from there. But it was just. It's so weird how and I'm pretty sure NEW, there was some airplay with that song as well.
Yeah, I mean, they broadcasted a concert from the tour. So they
put it on the King Biscuit Flower Hour.
I don't remember. I just know that it's on. I know that it's on YouTube. So and it's from WNEW.
Like King Biscuit was like the thing.
I think it was like Saturday nights or Sunday nights that they would have that on. And I recorded, I think Phil live at the Perkins Palace, the Phil Collins concert. Like I recorded it off of that show. And then next thing you know, it comes out on VHS, a few years later. But yeah, that was always those are great memories.
And, and to just addressing, Squire on Tempest Fusion in the bass, can we just say like Alan White on this record?
Yeah.
Is like, everybody always talks about like Bruford and how important Bruford was. Bruford played on the first, 4 or 5 Yes records. But Alan White was there for the rest of the ride, and I don't think Alan White gets nearly enough credit for his abilities as a drummer, and it's because he's not flashy or overly technical, and not that he can't be, but he doesn't need to be. Like he serves the song. This record is where to me, it's his like showcase, like more than any other.
He holds it down. He
knows it down. He's more of the
so
rock. He
bombastic on this
provides more
record.
of the rock element. He's straightforward. He's played with John Lennon.
Yep,
he was in Plastic Ono Band. So
played on All Things Must Pass.
Yep. So yeah, Bruford is much more steeped in the jazz theory.
Yep.
So his like little time signatures overall, which I love, but it's like, but Alan White,
that's
quite a contrast.
Yeah, this album doesn't need that. This album needs a rock drummer to propel the music forward, not kind of accompany the music and put little flourishes in. Like we don't need a Stuart Copeland on this.
Yeah, I mean, he really shines on this album.
Yeah, and they all do. All right, so here we go. I've got a challenge for you guys because I was thinking about this and I'm like, for people that are listening to this episode, I'm like, well, I don't like prog music or I'm not into whatever. You know what? This is a good album for people that don't like prog. I really think it is because it's so well recorded that you can listen to it. So I was thinking to myself, and I want to put it to you guys, and you're gonna give me your answer. Is I want you to come up with an 80s 3-pack of albums that would be good for someone who does not like prog. So I want a 3 albums with drama is included. So you get 2 more of what 3 albums are you going to tell somebody that doesn't like prog? Listen to these 3. So what's going to get them into it? Not the shit that's far out, but how are you going to get someone's going to say you don't like prog? Okay. Here's your starter pack. Who wants to go first? So
I'll let Chris go first. Yeah.
Oh, Jesus! Think about this. Yeah, I really kind of do. And it can only be 80s records.
Yeah, it's the 80s. Yeah, because that's the more modern stuff. So that's going to be, first of all, that's going to be easier for someone to get into, right? Like let's put our chips on the table. People are, I don't like the airy fairy stuff and the gnomes and the leaping frogs. I like modern music. Okay, I've got 3 prog albums for people that don't like prog. Drama, yes, drama, and what are your other 2?
Okay.
Wow.
If you're not sure, I'll want me to go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't know you were actually doing this. I thought you just wanted us to answer.
I did it myself. I mean, I did it myself.
Well, let's hear what you got.
While you're thinking, I'll give you time to think. My 3 is going to be yes, drama, moving pictures from Rush, and probably the self-titled Genesis album. Because that's it. Kind of, it gets you kind of, that's a little bit more poppy, but it's still got like the prog elements towards it, but it's still very listenable and kind of, it kind of leads you in. And Exit Stage Left is just, chock full of that good stuff. The songs are short and sharp, and they get in and get out. So I think, if I gave somebody a 3-pack and say, okay, here you go, they would know Tom Sawyer. They might know, they would know probably Limelight, so it's stuff that can kind of, and then when you get to Genesis, like that's all,
Home by the Sea.
Yeah, it's kind of stuff that people are like, oh, okay, this is prog, like that's prog. I was like, yeah, well, it is. So those are my 3.
Okay.
Chris, what do you got? Chris looks like he's looking.
Shit I am looking shit up because I'm trying to. Sometimes I put on the spotlight. So I was thinking. There's 2 Marillion albums I like, so I'm trying to decide between the 2. Misplaced Childhood or Clutching at Straws. I would say Clutching at Straws.
Good choice.
It's a little bit more rockin'. And then I would probably say, for people who are into like the Talking Heads and stuff, and I'm probably stealing one of Eric's right now, I would say Discipline by King Crimson.
That's a prog album for people that don't like prog.
Yes.
Okay.
No, that actually is not one of my choices. I would probably go with, besides drama, it would be probably Peter Gabriel's Melt record, which has a lot of sort of proggy elements to it. There's enough very introspective type of songs on there. There's things like No Self Control, which is a little bit crazy, and you can't ask for a better like sort of appetizer of prog, because you got Robert Fripp playing on that song, you got Phil Collins on drums, Kate Bush singing backing vocals, and then I think you have John Giblin on bass, who would later join Simple Minds on that track. So, but there's some very modern players on this record. It's very very dreary, but you got stuff like Games Without Frontiers, which is that kind of new wave kind of sound to it. So
okay,
I would choose that.
So two.
That's 2, and I think probably.
So that means So is out of it because you can't double up on Gabriel. So
no, So I would have took So, but it there's enough. It's probably leaning more towards Gabriel doing poppy.
I was gonna say it's not
more
really
sort of world music. So I would put that more in the category of that. But I might go with maybe Remain in Light by Talking Heads, early Talking Heads, Once in a Lifetime. He's there's enough there.
I considered a prog.
Again,
I was just thinking the same thing. Yeah.
Again, working with Brian Eno and working with I consider it.
Do you consider?
I do. Proggy, like I've always said, prog to me is widespread. I consider Synchronicity a prog album. Ghost in the Machine.
I consider Village People prog, and they're my
I would say
group.
Maybe Ghost in the Machine might be another choice for me. Being that there's some stuff in there.
I was looking more for traditional prog that veers towards pop. Police are squarely pretty much pop with prog and jazz and world elements to them, but they're squarely 3-minute.
Okay, well then let me go with. Okay, so let me go with yes. He picked Chris. You picked Discipline, which is probably a little heavier. Prog wise, but I would probably I probably would have picked Beat or Three of a Perfect Pair.
Too. Yeah.
One of those two, because they're a little bit more accessible to listen to. But yeah, or you mentioned Marillion too. Those are good choices.
I would pick I Advanced Masked with Robert Fripp and Andy Summers. You see that video?
How about Squack It with Squire and Steve Hackett or GTR? Remember that?
Oh God!
Or fucking what was it? What was the other one? Emerson, Lake and Powell.
Yeah.
Holy shit! There was so many. 3 of the 3 for the power of 3 or some crap it was just
I think in the 80s there had to have been a summit where all the prog group members got together. And then they all put their name in a hat, and then they just drew things and said, okay, here's the next group. It's going to be a trio. GTR. Okay, there you go. And then here's the next group we're going to do. And they just drew names and put people together. It's like, because that's what it seemed like, a slapdash of like, who can we chuck together and call it a prog supergroup? I'm surprised it doesn't say Asia. I'm surprised Asia didn't come up, because that would be I
feel like I don't know, like.
No, that's too AOR for me.
I was thinking the same thing.
There's really, aside from maybe Wildest Dreams, that's probably the proggiest. I don't consider Heat of the Moment a prog song or at all. In fact, if you didn't know who played on this record, people would probably, maybe to your point, it might be the go-to. And people find out who plays on it, they'd be like, "Oh, okay, prog players play it, but it's not prog. It doesn't sound like prog." So that's a good. It actually is a good choice.
Fake out.
Fake out, exactly. Because to me, it's like doing more sort of a journey approach or a foreigner approach with that record, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, well yeah,
it's decent. We talked about it. It's a good album, but it's
So you can reference our Asia episode.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I think that's going to do it. I think, this is album short. We don't need to do favorite tracks because it's just like, pick them,
whatever, wherever the needle falls for sure.
Yeah. You're Man in a White Car, it's 1 minute and 20. So even if you don't like it, you could just stick with it and you'll get through.
I love the fact that song was written about Gary Newman.
Yeah. In his car.
Yeah,
it's until the very end. It's like Man in a White Car, and then it's like another 1 or 2 lines, and it's like something over, and then you get could it really happen? So I'm like, all right,
One of the craziest things about this album that I ever saw was the one time I got to see the classic lineup of Yes. Dream Theater opened, and Yes wouldn't perform drama music with John Anderson, so Dream Theater during their opening set played like an abbreviated version of Machine Messiah. Like they played all the instrumental parts of Machine Messiah.
That's cool. Yeah,
it was really funny.
Yeah, he's come on, man.
Yeah,
he's so resistant to and it was this new style of music that gave Yes their only #1 single. you know, that whole 90125 is a whole story in and of itself because it wasn't.
Of course.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't really wasn't going to talk about it much because I figured we would talk about it at some point.
Yeah, but just to, you know, like, and that's what made me think that Anderson and Wakeman leaving was kind of even though it wasn't a firing, like I said, I think it was kind of necessary to kind of push Yes into the 80s and at least set them up. The future was still unwritten, but at least it set them up that they weren't stuck in the old thing. They had made that clean cut.
Yeah.
From the 70s. They had really cut it clean there and said, okay, we're not that anymore, because you're not going to go back to that likely, especially,
I'm convinced
the advancements that were happening in music too, in technology.
I'm convinced that John Anderson is a hobbit. I mean, he's just a fucking, like, he just, you know, he's really into that mystical, that spiritual kind of stuff, like really sort of like hippie type.
That's why Tales of Topographic Ocean is so out there.
Yeah.
There's
and, you know, when he does like Owner of a Lonely, he's so out of place with that. It's so cringy to watch him like trying to do like a little dance. Like he's so out of his element there.
There's a video on YouTube. Find it. It's not it's not the official Owner of a Lonely Heart. It's a different version. Like they were in like like in a TV show, and John Anderson's wearing like a track suit and sandals. It is so uncomfortable looking. So they probably did it before the single hit big, and then they're like, oh, we need an official video. But you know, the fortunes of Yes would turn. They would get enough by embracing that, you know, forward looking, like, you know, not be so dogmatic. It paid off. And then of course, you know, things would, you know, they would have their ups and downs, but this album was a bellwether. Another group that made that pivot into the 80s, like we've talked about, Eric. We've talked about so many prog groups that did it on purpose. I don't think Yes did it on purpose. It was just kind of, they were going that way, and a couple of members really weren't.
Yeah.
So they just soldiered on. But like we said with Rush, they said, we need to make our songs shorter. We need to make them punchier. We don't need to do, you know, all this crazy stuff. And it paid off. And then they said, and then Steve Howe says, oh, I really like working with Geoff Downes. Let's leave and make a new band. So just like leave Yes. And it's like, okay.
Well, I just read though, also that the management actually approached him about it. And let's put that album together. And they, you know, and that blew my, it was like, really? Like, so it was basically a record company thing. Like it's literally that's how it was created. It's, which is kind of like the whole. So yeah, it's no surprise that the album is what it is in that regard. You know, so yeah.
And then just one final thing about Trevor Horn, and because Eric mentioned his production thing, his wife actually said to him, I think it was after this part with Drama, she said, "Listen, you're never going to be an A-list vocalist. Like you're just not going to. You're probably like you'll probably be more successful in production." And he was. I didn't know this. I have one of their CDs.
Yeah.
He was one of the founders of Art of Noise.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he ended up leaving relatively early and then came back, but you know, and then he produced ABC's album, which I'm going to go listen to. You know, and of course, and then like I said, Frankie Goes to Hollywood is just a beautiful sounding album. You
could definitely, and you might be able to tell now that I'm thinking about some of that stuff, like ABC. Like I could definitely see him producing that because it has that sound.
Yeah, so I want
to go bright, very sort of like, you know, yeah.
I want to go listen to his production stuff now, which is weird. I usually get into an artist, but not as a producer.
He produced Seal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
He loved working with Seal because he loved his voice. It was easy to work with, and he had a long arrangement with Seal, long standing.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah, he did that song "Crazy," and I think he did "Kiss from a Rose," which he won. I think he won a Grammy for that. From
"Flowers in the Dirt" by Paul McCartney.
Yeah, he was. The guy was everywhere. He's like the English version of the English Jeff Lynne, who was living in America. Yeah. But in England, he was just producing everybody in England. He was just producing.
He produced the Carpet Crawlers, the when Genesis
Genesis
the Trevor Horn produced that. Yeah. which which is kind of cool, so that's like, so he even worked with them. So that,
Yeah. And there's a great, maybe I'll put it in the show notes. There's a great video of him like from a couple of years ago where he deconstructs Owner of a Lonely Heart. He has all the tracks. And he said, and this little snippet, like this was this, and this was like a weird thing. And by then the Fairlight had probably come and gone.
It's very Beatles,
But he breaks he's got all the like 15 or 20 tracks and he breaks it down. It's just great to see his process. But that's going to do it for this episode of the 3320. This is like a prog version of an episode. This one's gone on pretty long. So it's only apropos that our prog album, the episode should like be proggy as well.
There you go.
Ups and downs, starts and stops. but yeah, check out this album. Even if you don't like prog, I'm putting the stamp on it. As someone who's the least proggiest of the three of us, it hits in all the right rock places, and the songs they're all long, but you don't care because it doesn't grind to a halt. Every these guys just keep it moving. They just like, okay, next one, check it off. Everybody, let your fingers cool off a little bit, and then we'll work it up again. And so this to me, this was a hidden treasure. Shame on me for not listening to Eric 40 years ago. Maybe I wasn't. You know what? I might not have been ready for it then, and I was ready for it now. And I'm so glad that it is.
I'm glad you like it. I'm glad you like
it. I
don't
like it. I love it. I love this album. But like I said, I did go backwards, and I'm not gonna. That other stuff ain't for me.
No, I get you.
I tried to listen to Tormato a couple of times. I'm like,
I don't like Tormato. After Relayer, going for the one, there's a few tracks I do like. I don't like the production on that record though at all. It's very
a good album.
But there are some good, like the title track is good, but it's almost annoying though. It's very grating. I wish the production were better on that song. I love Parallels. I love, but there's,
It's Trevor Horn or it's nothing.
There you go.
That's it. That's how I take my yes. I take my yes with Trevor.
Hey, I think a lot of fans will agree with you on this one today. It's as far as, diehard Yes fans will probably, I dare say, new people coming to the fray. Yeah.
I think it's an easy entree. So let us know on social media, Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube. Leave a comment about it. Was this one that you were resistant to, or were you in with it in for a penny, in for a pound with Yes, no matter what they were doing? Comment. We will certainly get back to you. We love to interact. If you're in the your podcast app, you can send us a message from there, but we won't be able to respond to that. But we read everything, and usually an episode or two afterwards we'll respond to it, and that'll keep you listening to see if we responded to your message. So Christopher Clark, thank you so much for joining us for this.
Thank you for having me, man. This is a good one.
Got your dose of prog in for the month?
I did.
Yeah, we great to have you on this one.
I think based on Eric's definition of prog, I think we can do a Robert Goulet album and call it prog as well. It's very artsy stuff, so I think we can kind of get Robert Goulet in there and say, "Oh, this is prog." Okay. Yeah. Of course, Eric and I are here each and every week. We thank you for joining us. Thank you for checking us out. Thank you for staying with us for this long. New episodes come out every Thursday, so you can bet your bottom dollar that we'll be back here in a week with a new, fresh, hot, and ready episode just waiting for you to enjoy. So for Chris, for Eric, this has been Dean. We will catch you on the extended tracks flip side of Yes Drama. Catch you later.
You've been listening to the 3324 podcast with Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider, so please like, subscribe, and rate to become a part of the 3324 family. Your feedback is important, so make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 3324 podcast and on Twitter at 3324p to join the conversation.